What happened to him? He took a fall. Let me see that. We need to help him.
The westbound stagecoach groaned to a halt in the dusty settlement of Clearwater, and a weary widow named Margaret Halley descended, clutching a threadbare carpetbag, while her 3 small children tumbled out behind her like frightened sparrows. She had sold everything after her husband's fever, death, and journeyed 1,000 miles on the fragile hope that some kind man might accept not just a wife, but an entire ready-made family, aching for a home. The townsfolk glanced at her with pity, and the mail-order agency had all but given up, because every rancher who read her honest letters took one look at her little ones and flatly refused to meet her. Standing on that sun-bleached boardwalk, with her eldest daughter clinging to her waist and her 2 younger children pressing close, she whispered to no one and everyone, "No one wants a bride with 3 kids." The words hung in the dry air like a final surrender, and her daughter's eyes filled with tears because even at 8 years old she understood that their small, fragile family was being measured and found unwanted by a harsh and indifferent world. But what a quiet rancher named Jacob Wilder said next, stepping from the shadow of the mercantile where he had silently watched her arrival, would utterly rewrite every sorrow she had ever carried and rebuild her shattered faith in love. Jacob had lost his own young family to scarlet fever 5 winters past, and had long buried his heart beneath the endless work of his modest cattle spread, never once imagining he might again feel the warmth of belonging. He approached Margaret not with a polished speech, but with his weathered hat in his hands and a tremor in his deep voice as he spoke the words that stopped her breath. "I'd been praying for a family, not just a wife." Margaret stared at him with disbelief, convinced that such a man could not truly exist. Yet something in his hazel eyes, a mixture of old grief and newborn hope, made her accept the wagon ride to his ranch just to see if his kindness was real. The children, who had learned to expect coldness from strangers, were stunned when Jacob knelt in the dust to meet them at eye level and presented each with a small, hand-carved gift he had spent the previous night making. That first evening, he insisted on preparing supper himself, a simple stew that he served with such gentle ceremony that little Tommy, the youngest, asked if they had wandered into a fairy tale by mistake. Jacob gave the children the cabin's only bedroom, laying out fresh straw ticks and quilts while he slept in the barn, and Margaret wept into her pillow because no man had ever treated her little ones as anything but an inconvenience. Over the following weeks, he taught young Tommy to sit on a gentle horse, showed Sarah how to gather warm eggs without frightening the hens, and listened with infinite patience to little Eliza's endless stories about a rag doll named Princess. One afternoon, when Sarah fell from a fence and split her knee open, Jacob carried her 2 miles to the doctor's house, his shirt soaked with her blood, and he did not rest until he knew she would heal without lasting harm. In that fearful hour, watching this strong, quiet man cradle her sobbing daughter as if she were his own flesh, Margaret understood that she was witnessing a love far deeper than romantic sentiment, a love that rebuilt broken worlds. Jacob never pressed Margaret for affection or gratitude, allowing her heart to mend at its own pace, because he knew that a woman who has been repeatedly rejected must first learn to trust before she can ever truly love again. One starlit evening, on the porch, Jacob confessed that he had almost given up on life before he saw her step off that and that her courage to keep fighting for her children had resurrected something he thought was dead forever. Margaret, her voice trembling with emotion she no longer wished to hide, told him that he was the first person since her husband's passing who had made her feel that her children were not a liability but a luminous gift. Their wedding was witnessed by the 3 children, a circuit preacher, and a handful of ranch hands who had never seen their boss smile so freely. And the simple ceremony felt more sacred than any cathedral wedding Margaret had ever imagined. Jacob legally adopted all 3 children before the end of the first year, standing before a judge with his calloused hand resting on each small shoulder, and he vowed to be the father they had lost and so desperately deserved. The ranch prospered not just in cattle but in laughter, because a home built on unconditional acceptance possesses a strength that drought, hardship, and winter storms can never fully conquer or extinguish. Margaret, who had once whispered words of despair on a dusty boardwalk, now sang old lullabies while she kneaded bread, and her children grew sturdy and confident under the steady gaze of the man who had chosen them all without reservation. The Clearwater community, which had once regarded the widow with pity, came to admire the Wilder family as a living testament that love is not limited by blood but is expanded by the boundless capacity of a willing and generous heart. When a neighboring rancher remarked that Jacob had taken on an awful lot of responsibility, marrying a woman with 3 young ones, Jacob replied that he had not taken on a burden, but had received an inheritance more precious than any land or livestock. Years rolled across the prairie like patient wagons, and the children grew tall and strong. The eldest daughter, Sarah, eventually marrying a fine young blacksmith who had learned from Jacob the true measure of an honorable man. Tommy became Jacob's right hand on the ranch, and every head of cattle they branded together carried the unspoken story of a boy once unwanted who had found in his adopted father a hero he wanted to emulate for the rest of his days. Little Elisa, who had been barely walking when she first arrived, grew into a spirited young woman who could ride any horse on the spread and who never once doubted that she was fiercely and unconditionally loved by both her parents. When the silver finally threaded through Jacob's hair and Margaret's steps grew slower, they would still sit on that same porch where their love had first timidly bloomed, watching their grandchildren chase fireflies beneath the endless, star-swept sky. The story of the widow no one wanted and the cowboy who saw a family instead of a burden spread quietly across the territory, planting seeds of hope in every lonely heart that heard the unlikely and beautiful tale of Wilder Ranch. Margaret often told the young mothers who sought her counsel that the moment she whispered her deepest fear aloud was the precise moment the universe, through a grieving rancher's courage, began to compose her greatest answered prayer. Jacob lived well into his 80s, and on his final day, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, he looked at Margaret with the same tender wonder he had worn on that dusty street so many decades before and squeezed her hand in peaceful farewell. Margaret followed him 2 springs later, and they were laid side by side beneath a shared stone that the children inscribed with the simple words, "He took the unwanted and made them his greatest treasure, and they loved him for it all their days." Their legacy endures not merely in the prosperous ranch that still bears the Wilder name, but in the unbroken lineage of kindness that every descendant carries, a living reminder that real love never counts the cost but multiplies the joy. Travelers who pause at the old Wilder homestead often comment on the palpable peace that still lingers there, as if the very soil remembers a man who looked upon a weary widow and her 3 children and saw nothing less than a holy gift. The tale of Margaret's whispered despair and Jacob's transformative answer continues to echo across the frontier of the human heart, proving that the most rejected among us may carry the richest capacity to inspire profound and lasting love. If this story of undeserved grace and wholehearted acceptance has stirred something deep within your spirit, then you understand why we are devoted to unearthing these forgotten jewels of courage from the Old West's quiet, dusty corners. Please tap that like button right now to honor every brave mother and every humble cowboy who built families not on convenience, but on the unshakable foundation of compassion, because your click amplifies the message that such goodness still matters profoundly. Subscribe to Stories Hub Official and ring the notification bell, so that each week a new tale of unlikely redemption and frontier hope arise to remind you that love often appears in the most unexpected and transformative of disguises. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us about a moment when someone welcomed you fully, baggage and all, because your personal story might just become the beacon that guides another lost soul safely home tonight. From all of us who pour our hearts into crafting these narratives, may you always discover open arms that see not burdens, but blessings, and may your home forever echo with the unending laughter of a love that shows you without reservation.